Hello and welcome to Garden Chatter, where we connect gardeners, bloggers, and experts so that we can all grow and learn together. I'm super excited tonight. We have Matt Powers on. Matt's going to be talking to us about permaculture. He's been doing a lot with permaculture and learning and putting it into practice on his place. We almost had him on the show a couple weeks ago, but we had a technical issue, and he was gracious enough to rejoin us. So we'll get to him in just a moment. The great thing about Google Hangouts on Air is that you can join the conversation and leave questions or comments that we can respond to. And so my co-host Bren can tell how you can join the show. Bren, how are you doing over in Ohio?
Well, we're getting plenty of April showers here in Ohio, and so I'm going to be excited to see what May flowers they bring, right? So anyhow, so if you are watching this presentation on the Google Hangout, you're going to want to take your cursor, just go right up to the top right. There'll be a grid. Click on the grid, and you'll see a Q&A. Hit the Q&A, and you'll get a nice little bar over there. I always get it mixed up. It's that way, right? On the right-hand side of your screen, where we hope you will say hi and hopefully ask some questions for our awesome guest host tonight. I also want to note that you can also use the hashtag Garden Chatter. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Adam.
Yeah, and Matt, how are you doing over there? It looks like you're in the sun right now.
Yeah, you know, these California foothill storms, they kind of roll in and roll out pretty quick. We don't tend to get much prolonged moisture when we get it, and then our soil is often pretty hydrophobic, and so it'll just pearl off and kind of run off, and then create more erosion. So I mean, when most people can kind of see that in the valley in different areas that are desertifying. So it's kind of on my area though, it's actually wonderful because all the water gets trapped. And so if you you guys can all see me, right? So if I go like this and you kind of look at and see what I'm looking at right now, all my plants, and then down this hill over the edge. Is all swaled. So you can still see it, right?
Yeah, we can.
Yeah.
Do you see all the stuff down there?
I see.
No?
I think I can see the swales. There's a little bit of glare with the sunlight.
Is that better?
I think those are the swales there, right? The little, yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, I mean, we've all seen the terraces that the Mayans did, and you know, in China for the rice paddies and all that stuff, and we've all seen that over and over again, but no one's doing it really. And the reason they did it was because it allowed them to save their soil, because it allowed them to fully capture and pacify water. So in California especially, it's a way to start reforesting the land, and that's really like the issue. All right, so there's been a recent paper that's been done. I can't remember. Stop it. All right, so there's been recently a paper that was done about how if the forest is cut on the coast, it doesn't have moisture conveyor belt into the inland where the forests are. So if we don't have this, and you know the way it works is trees interact with the water from the ocean that comes in, and then they evapotranspire water, but they also trap so much water in the ground and create so much shade, and they create all these other relationships around them that they actually create rain. So if we don't have this layered effect of having forests bringing in moisture, and the earthworks in place, the Central Valley is going to be in real trouble really fast. But we can still turn it around. I mean, the reality is things are not as crazy as people are making it out to be. Headlines are wonderful things because they're so fun, and they get us scared and excited and angry, but they're really mostly meaningless. So the whole 1 year of water left in California is, you know, spurious at best. So
Yes.
I'm
So
kind of
Matt, let me
like,
just interrupt just for a second. So you said in the Central Valley. So for folks that don't know exactly where you are, so you're in California. Where in California are you?
okay, so if you think Fresno's here and Yosemite's here, the road between them is Highway 41, and we're like right here. And so we're, Fresno, the air is really bad, and in Yosemite, it's so beautiful, and we're kind of a mix between desertification and beautiful landscape. And so it's really about like bringing out the aspects of what's already here for me right now. But yeah, that's where I am. I'm in the Central Valley.
Okay.
I'm where the fires were. So like
Ah,
Mariposa is an hour and a half that way, and then Oakhurst is that way, and those were where those two big fires were last year, and then North Fork's that way, where there was another really big fire recently too, and they all made national news. And those were like the fires that people talked about up here. And so fire is a very big deal. We want to kind of create fire belts to like protect the land, but you can't prove those kind of things until you have a fire, which is,
yeah.
That's a little bit of a tricky part, huh?
yeah.
So you have been really diving into permaculture. Do you want to just explain, maybe for someone that doesn't really know, what permaculture is? Like, what is it?
Okay, I'll give a definition and then explain why I came to it. Because I
Okay.
feel like there's some people out there who are doing organic and they're like, I still don't get it. This is supposed to work, right? There's a lot of people out there that feel that way. And for me, as soon as I learned permaculture, it was like, I got this. And it was unreal. And still to this day, I haven't found anyone with better soil than me. So, and my soil like that I developed that's the best has only been, it's only like 7 months old. All right, so permaculture is a design, an ethical design science that benefits both people and the environment beneficially. That benefits both people and the environment. So you basically take the patterns of nature and the systems of nature, and you figure out how to use them to run a farm or a business or an economy or a school. Like, it can be applied to anything, but originally it was permanent agriculture. And a lot of people say it's permanent culture now, because it can be applied to so many things. But what's really, really fantastic about it is it solved for me a lot of problems. I wasn't, I didn't realize I was just mining the soil, and I wasn't building the soil. And so there's this like threshold, and you're like, oh, I'm companion planting, I'm adding my compost, you're doing all these things, but it's just not working. So especially in places where it's getting really dry, and probably places where it's getting really wet, because unless you have earthworks when it's really wet, you're dealing with a lot of water. But if you have earthworks, you have a place for that water. By earthworks, I mean like those swales. You can do a whole diverse, different, lots of different versions of those kind of things. You don't even really need swales. You could rip your land along contour. That means like a plow that's just a cut, and then you could like water compost tea down there, and then plant trees in it, and you could create a totally amazing effect. So there's actually a lot of different ways, because every climate has like give points. Like, for instance, in the tropics, you cannot have acres of corn. It just doesn't work. So like the jungle and the tropics and their ecosystems support these like small open spaces, and everything else is very chunky and very large. But in the cold temperate climate where corn and all these kind of things like really reused recently, grains, right? Those areas actually can support quite big fields, despite meadows, right? Those naturally occur, right? So So stuff like that, permaculture is all about the language of nature, and it basically takes ecology, and instead of it being an observation, like an observational science, it's an action-based science based upon nature. So you figure out the patterns, you observe the patterns of nature, and then you harmonize with them. So in other words, I'm looking at this hill, I'm measuring how it's gone contour, and then I'm planting on contour, or I'm making a ditch on contour and making a soft berm on the lower side called a swale, and planting in that, and that's harmonic to nature, because what's going to happen is it's going to create a flat path, and it's going to stop all the water. And it's going to create harmony, right?
Right. So, Matt, first of all, I have to tell you, I think it's neat that your pooch is there with you, your puppy. We usually have cat people on. So it's nice to see a dog.
Yeah? Oh, yeah. Well,
That's awesome.
Yeah, let me explain how I came to gardening, because that might put it more because I didn't start off gardening in the traditional sense. I came out west, and I was a professional musician, and they had this garden, and we were buying organic food because my wife had cancer, had cancer because they removed her thyroid and then did ablation, radiation therapy. And so this garden they had, it was huge. They built this huge garden, fenced it. Not as huge as my system now, but so they made this garden, and it didn't go very well, and it got overtaken with weeds, and I was like, food's expensive. Yeah. Maybe I should try growing it. And I also was figuring out that the really good food, not the organic food, because organic is just like a minimal standard. That means it doesn't have poison on it to a certain degree, because there's new organic standards that allow things. But it's so that's a minimal. That doesn't guarantee that it's nutritious even. It could be all just water and then a fertilizer basically. So nitrogen, water, and a little bit of fiber. So in my mind, I started really questioning things, and then I was like, how the heck do you tell any of these things without paying a lab huge amounts of money? So I was getting super frustrated, and then I discovered Permaculture and Sepp Holzer and Jeff Lawton and the term permaculture, and basically very quickly, Sepp Holzer's method is he doesn't do transplants. He doesn't do greenhouses where he's growing his annuals to put them in. He throws everything or plants it in the ground by hand. He has 30,000 trees on 100 acres. He manages the land with animals. So he goes in and picks the apples or whatever for the sale for this company. He sometimes sells to schnapps companies and stuff because this stuff is so high quality. They can't get it at the lower altitudes, and so he'll bring in the pigs, and the pigs will eat all the deadfall fruit and the fruit that's infected with parasites, and so it'll interrupt the pest cycle, and it will feed his pigs. And they'll eat the weeds and trot them down and manure it and everything. And then he just moves them through, and then he's got his orchard reset, And it's those kind of having, and then he'll use pigs to create ponds. He'll have them, they'll fence them, or I don't know if he'll even fence them. I think pigs actually will naturally go to a good pond site, because of the way it works moisture-wise.
Yeah.
Well,
so, yeah.
Oh, I was just wondering, so what you mentioned that beyond just the compost and this and that, what are some of the other things that are working for you to build your soil? So you've done the swales. I don't know.
So let me just share what I do. Okay.
Yeah.
So
what's working for you?
What I did is I cut on contour. I flipped over the sod. I did it upside down, and then I chopped it up so that it would be loose, and then I don't even think I added any bunny manure. Bunny manure is really fun because it's already neutral. It's not gonna like burn anything. Not neutral. The nitrogen's not too high. It's balanced,
Great.
and so you can just toss it in. But I don't think I even did that. What I did there was I tossed like 10 pounds of cowpeas on it because I saw Jeff Lawton do that. And I was like, I can't do this everywhere. I can't afford to do it everywhere, you know. So I was like, I'll do what he says to exactly here, you know. And I'm like wincing as I'm doing it because it feels like too much. Because you like can like feel the dollar like that you just like that spot this big, and you're like, all right, you know. But what happened was it all started fixing nitrogen in the soil, like, you know, just started changing. And I mixed in the Fukuoka mix, you know, which is all, you know, you throw everything, and that's how I planted. And that's how I plant a lot of things. I just throw. So I did daikon radish because that creates huge holes in the soil, goes really deep and rots. And I planted mustard to a small degree, and clover, inoculated clover. Which has taken off to a certain degree. Yeah, and so the cowpeas, what they did when they broke down was obviously they turned into, you know, pea straw, which is also nitrogen fixing. But I chopped and dropped it, and so it rotted and like broke down on itself, and you literally can dig 3 to 4 feet deep, and it's all the same color and like the most unbelievable texture. It's incredible. Like
How
ridiculous.
deep do the cowpeas go? Because you said the daikon radishes go deep. Do the cowpeas punch down pretty well too?
You know, if they do, their roots break down so fast. I don't think so. I mean, the legumes are just like light-footed weeds. That's why a lot of them end up on the noxious, like, or the invasive weeds list, you know. And those are really all those ones that are really bad, you know, like sharp and spiny. Those are the ones that we have on our worst soil. So if we want to get rid of those, you actually can just run a chicken tractor over them, and they'll dig everything up, scratch everything, and if you keep like them on that patch a little bit, you can even toss a little grain in there, and they'll just like dig more, and then move them, and leave it alone. You'll have like totally different things growing. Like you just leave it, and like the weeds recolonize it. You have totally different things growing, and it's part of the succession of the forest. So you change the pH, so of course different weed seeds are going to grow. The pH is different, you know. The nitrogen's different. The calcium's different. So there's all these different layers that lead to succession. So let me talk about succession for a second. So the succession of a forest. So if we go to the beach, it starts off as dead sand, right? And then we're going, and it's like sea kale. You have mustard. You have like turnips and radishes, and then you have like cauliflower, brassicas. The actinobacterial, you know, soil has a place in nature, right? So they came from a place in nature, and then you go further, and then you have bacterial soils, which is like many of the garden varieties that we eat are annuals that are like that are in the bacterial and slightly acidic, slightly alkaline, that range there. But when you start going more fungal, you go into old-growth forest, which is actually much more stable and traps water. So the reality is the Central Valley needs to stop doing annuals, cutting their soil every year. What they need to do is focus on perennials and trees. And yeah, it's a long-term investment, but we need to stop looking at things like this, to start looking at things in a wider view, because we're going, the profits of the farmer, and everyone else is going, wait a second, what about water? And we're looking at like maybe like this and not this, even there. And what we need to do is we need to actually look ahead and imagine what we want, and then decide how to get there. But no one is actually looking at what a stable ecosystem in the Central Valley would look like. The west side is a desert with no water, so we should do a big desert guild and hope that we can connect the coastal forest to the mountain forest and get the water to start again. Because the largest body of water west of the Mississippi was in the Central Valley up until like either the late 1800s or the early 1900s. I want to say the early 1900s, but I'm not going to say for sure because I don't really know in my head right now. But King Cotton drained that, and basically they set up all irrigations, and there's basically cities that would be under 3 feet, 4 feet of water that would wouldn't even be there because this body of water would still be there. And it was all duck and fish. There were no predators. So you could go out in a boat with your kid and just go hunt for the weekend and have it be like this, like easy peasy kind of experience that was like Disneyland of hunting. You know what I mean? So it was once wonderful, and we can recreate that because the land was designed for that. You know what I mean? Like the land it was ready. It did it. It was great. We can rebuild that, and we actually probably can enhance it a little bit as we put it back together.
You had mentioned you had chickens. I was just wondering if I thought maybe you had a pig. How are you using animals to build the soil, and are you kind of putting them to use?
Yeah, my animals are my workers. Sepp Holzer is an amazing guy. He totally inspired me and really drilled that in. That if you don't want to do if you don't want animals to do the work for you, then you have to do the work the animals do. And often that work is incredibly complex, and we actually don't even really understand it. So let's take like birds. Like my birds up there, I bring in animal bedding that's used. I bring in manure. I bring in weeds from the yard. So I don't even think of them as weeds in a negative way. They're just really just mulch, and they're just different types of plants. Once you learn the plants' names, you're like, oh, and that's a type of amaranth. It's called pigweed. Like that means amaranth grows wild here. It'll grow really well here. You just once you get past that. So I feed my chickens all this different stuff. A local grocery store gives us their old produce for them. And so what I do is I mix it all together, and I turn it just like a compost. So I rebuild a hill for them, and they're constantly breaking it down and digging it out. And they're actually creating this incredible like compost mulch stuff. And it gets hot. It does the whole composting thing. They stop where the heat is, and then they just like enjoy the heat. And so they don't dig too far into the heat because it's hot. And so they just like, you know what I mean? They clear off all the stuff that's not decomposing, expose it to decomposing, so that I'm like, okay, it's hot. I'm going to break that up and aerate it and mix it everything they removed. And so you relayer it, right? And then it breaks down more and more, and eventually I can't do anything with the pitchfork because it passes through. I'm like, okay, now I have two choices. I can go take it away and traditionally compost it for another week and get really, really nice compost. Or I could put it on my weeds that I just chopped and dropped, burn them because it's still a little hot, and then as it cools off, because I didn't do it in like that thick, I did it like that thick, as it cools off the next week or two, I can start planting it. So, you know what I mean? And so like those weeds that were there are now smothered with mulch like compost, and they've been kind of like burned out after they've been chopped and dropped. So I can go in there a week or two later and like chop up the soil and then like throw my beans or my corn or my amaranth or my Aztec spinach or whatever I really want that's larger seed, and not well. It also depends on the vigor of the seed, because you can throw mustard and it'll just be fine. And then I go back through, and sometimes I push things in, sometimes I push things over onto things, but often I just scatter mulch over that and then get it wet. You can also soak the beans and do that too to speed things up. But so the chickens are like my partners in mulch making, and that's why I don't kill my roosters, because my roosters, I have a bunch of roosters from this group that I grew out of chicks that we incubated that were from eggs that were laid on this farm.
It's 6 o'clock.
My phone, anyway. So I'm going to create a rooster yard so they can just make me mulch. And I'm just going to bring them tons of manure and tons of cuttings and everything. And I'm never going to feed them any grain or anything because there's no reason to. The birds survive just fine on the bugs that are attracted to all the compost and all that stuff. They're actually not eating what grosses us out in the manure land. They're eating the stuff that is feeding on it. And then some of it's so microscopic and it's happening so fast that it's like really hard to prove what they are and aren't eating. But it's clear that they're not like gobbling up manure, you know what I mean? And it's also clear that Joel Salatin's system where the birds follow the cows and they tear up the cow patties, what happens is the soil is much, much better. And so if you're growing the soil and if the birds are doing it naturally and if it's, healthy for the birds and you know what I mean, if it's all these different things, functions and stacking and they're all healthy and they're all provable, then I fully believe that it's natural and healthy to do it that way.
Yeah, it sounds like a good plan. I've been kind of moving towards that direction, just ripping out lots of quote-unquote weeds and grass. I haven't been weed eating really, mostly around.
I got a scythe. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you would just like chop it down before it forms seed heads, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Just kind of go like 10 square feet at a time or 5, and just take it down to the ground. Take an arm load, throw it in with the chickens, and that's been working. So I don't quite have enough stuff in there to really start composting, but that's kind of the direction I'm heading. So sounds good. Well, what about you? You're trying to grow. What's that?
I was just saying about your place. What you could do is after you cut it like that and you're taking away, something else is going to come in there, and it's not going to be replaced by that secession, and often it'll be replaced by a secession that you don't want. So what you want to do is you want to rake it, and then you want to toss in something desirable that's soft and nice, and also nitrogen fixings are the option later on to do something with that piece of land. So you do a nitrogen fixing inoculated clover seed, like a New Zealand white or something like that, and that'll be like a placeholder that's improving the soil.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah, and it's like green manure and all that. So what was the question?
Oh, well, I was just wondering, just kind of changing gears a little bit. You've been trying to grow lots of food that'll sustain your family. Not just broccoli and carrots and peas, but some things that'll really, tide you through. So what are you excited about coming up, or what are some of the things you're going to be growing this spring and summer?
Okay, cool. So part of everyone's mission and wherever they're at is figuring out what the land will support at staples, like at staple level. The foothills definitely can do amaranth grain, and it's especially good because amaranth doesn't require any post treatments. It's very easy to harvest. You can do it in a bowl and blow it off, and that's good enough. And that'll be clean, and it makes like a porridge. So that's like a really good survival crop. I'm growing that out, and then culinarily, I want to really figure out how to make it something that people want and desire, and like, oh, you know what? I prefer that. So I'm like a cook. I used to actually, before I was into permaculture, I did seasonality recipes, and my recipes are still online in places. But like I would teach people how to cook food out of the garden according to season. And so amaranth was one of those things I wanted to work on. Yellow strawberries is fun. Stuff like that. Different greens that people don't eat usually, like quinoa greens, are actually awesome. Red Aztec spinach is awesome. Something that's very underrated is strawberry spinach. So So talking about staples with my family. All right, so this area supports winter squash really well. So I've been working on adapting and creating local varieties of things because I let things mix. Because what I find is it's like I crossed a Queensland Blue with a curry, and it made this like volleyball size blue curry, and it's awesome. It was totally awesome. So I'm like, this is cool. You just keep doing your thing, you know. And the reality is, no one has that but me. And what I in my mind imagine is that everyone should be doing this because that means those genes are radically adapting to your environment. And it's not like you're inbreeding, you know what I mean, flipping like these insular switches, right? You're like doing within the same species, not species, same variety. You're doing kind of like a wide cross. Wide crosses can be between almost anything, so don't take that out of context. It's within its own thing. So you could do really crazy things like try to cross. But I've noticed that the funny thing is, it's like you're not getting acorn squashes crossing with like Hubbards. So the bees are at least that much, they distinguish that much. Because you know they go in teams, right? They're like, today we're doing tomatoes. And they're like, tomatoes! And they all go and fly and do tomatoes. That's like what bees do. So, like, I think that maybe they're, like, and that's the other thing. If you have, like, one of every kind of squash, they're going to cross like crazy. But if you have, like, 20 of like the blue Hubbard, and then you have like 30 sugar pie, you know, pumpkin, and then you have like 40 black futsu, which is really awesome. Black futsu, gotta recommend that. Baker Creek at rareseeds.com.
I was going to ask you where some of these vegetables are coming from because I've not heard of half of them.
Okay. All right. So let me give the lowdown. All right. So groworganic.com is really great for perennials that are organic and trees. But remember, we want to buy in January because by February, March, everything's sold out. So then Baker Creek with rareseeds.com is where I've gotten almost all my seeds. Jerry Gettle and his family totally inspired me early on, and I met them at the Heirloom Expo, and they actually supplied the seeds for my high school through Paul Wallace and Eileen Wallace, which is a wonderful couple over. They manage the Petaluma Seed Bank, which is also owned by the Gettle family. So wonderful people and wonderful seeds. And then I branched out. Territorial Seeds has some awesome stuff. Seed Savers Exchange is like, man, oh man, everyone should be part of it. It's the biggest database of seeds you can find. It's way better than the Grin database. Through the school, I was able to get some seeds for the kids there to work with, and the horticulture department to work with. Their seeds are awful. They totally baby them with like chemicals and everything, and so they just have weak genes. And they're like taking the diversity and just weakening it. So, yeah. And so I've got all these great seeds. Oh, wait. And I'm getting them also from Bountiful Gardens because they have some things that I can't get anywhere else. Yeah, the Seed Savers Exchange is basically a cooperative between like thousands of gardeners who all like create a database, and you can buy from that person and then like call them up and be like, hey, the beans I bought from you are doing this weird thing, and they'll be like, oh yeah, is this, have you done this to your soil? It needs to be, like that. Like, oh, okay, you literally can call them or write them. And so it's a totally different dynamic, and there's like 10,000 varieties. So wow. It's like a telephone book of everything that you can't get ever else. And Baker Creek, bless them, they're doing amazing things. Someone else that's really good is Joe Simcox over at he's the Botanical Explorer. He has the Rare Vegetable Seed Consortium online, and then I'm missing something. Oh yeah, Carol Depp. I buy seeds directly from Carol Depp, the person who wrote Resilient Gardener, and the Tao of Gardening, and How to Breed Your Own Vegetable Varieties. She's went to Harvard. She's a geneticist. She has a PhD. Unbelievably awesome writer. She inspired me before permaculture, and then after like permaculture, I was like, oh, you're just permaculture because you're really educated.
Yeah.
We had a couple of questions
Yeah.
on our comment blog from Bean and Bee blog, Alexis over there. Earlier on, we were talking about the chickens and livestock, and she was wondering what if you can't have livestock. And then before you dive into that, she also asked, have you ever grown purslane?
Oh yeah, well, purslane showed up.
It just showed up? Yeah.
Purslane showed up, and then have you saved seed from purslane? They make these tiny little cups like this, and then inside the cup, they're like the teeniest little seeds ever. They're the most novel seed that you can have. Like, forget mustard seeds. This is the tiniest seed like that I've ever harvested. It's so cute. I think the first time I harvested, I couldn't believe it was a seed, and I just started cracking up. But yeah, purslane I've grown, and I've saved seed from. I have some in my seed library, which everyone should have. They should have their own seed bank and library and whatnot, and they should have their own set of seeds that they share. Everyone should be sharing seed. So we should be having the genetics go and go and go, because we've lost so much diversity. We've had this huge die-off of diversity of food that we need to bring back. So we all can participate in that. So going back to what you're talking about, you don't have animals. Well, collect cardboard and newspapers, dig up the land, throw down some manure. It can be fresh, it doesn't matter, as long as the cardboard's on top. And then have soaked cardboard, throw it on there. To do like pretty thick, not crazy thick. You want it to be able to be wet, and then to soak, and then to like breathe through. So don't go too crazy. I've heard up in wetter areas that they would have like this much newspaper, and it would be dry underneath. So you want to be careful about that. You just don't want weed seeds to pop up through it. But either way, I don't think it will. And then you want to do ideally seedless manure on top of bunny manure or something like that. So this creates this pancake with the woody wood lignin inside, and so that creates like fungus, right? And then the nitrogen's on either side, and so fungus needs nitrogen to grow. That's why you do coffee grinds. Use coffee grinds in the oysters, the oyster mushroom grows, right? And so you're creating a fungal network that connects your entire backyard. And then you can do like 6 inches of like straw or mulch or something like that, or like broken down leaves maybe. And then you can do like 2 to 3 inches of compost. And then the thing is, I mean, I've heard horror stories about compost, because some people don't understand that like compost needs to be like normal temperature, not warm, like not still breaking down. Someone was like, yeah, I got this great compost. It's still warm. And I'm like, it's not compost yet. You know, it's composting. So you put that compost on, and then you scatter mulch on top. And that will break down into soil, and you can grow in it. You know what I mean? And by grow in it, I mean that you would cut down through it down to the soil and grow directly on the soil. You know what I mean? And you would likely be transplanting into the system unless you're tearing and getting soil and planting in that, like a pumpkin seed or something. And like if you want to do Seth Holzer's mode, you're gonna like build soil like they do in the tropics, because they don't do compost or anything down there, because the bugs will like eat it up and take it away. It goes. I mean, compost, as soon as it breaks down, it's gone in the tropics. So what they do down there, like Rosemary Morrow was talking to me about this one time. She said that you have to do green mulch, you have to do green manure. You have to grow your soil and then cut it, and then grow it and then cut it. And so it creates this building of layers, just like that in the peat moss. You know, they grow and then die, grow and then die, grow and then die, grow and then die. Instead of this layered effect in the peat moss that we're all using up at a rapid rate. Though I don't use any of that kind of stuff. I go down this side of the hill all the way to the dry creek, and I dig up from the inside bends of turns in the creek. I dig up sharp river sand, bring it up, and mix it with good dirt so that it's 50-50 ratio, and plant my transplant seeds in that. Because what happens is it makes them squirm because the water goes so fast through. So they're like, and they follow the water, and so they sprout faster, the roots develop faster, and you can transplant faster. So that's what I would do if I had no other options for a backyard, or I would borrow some animals for a few weeks and just hope no one catches you. Pigs are great at like deeper tilling, so like you plant potatoes after pigs are there. You can get light tiller like American guinea hog or tiny, but even they get pretty close to like, you know, fingerling potato depth. So if you can move them fast enough, they'll just eat the grass. American guinea hogs will prefer to eat weeds over your food. I've seen it over and over again. My pig used to go with me when it was young to the garden and stuff before it got too aggressive and dug down and ate potatoes. Then it stopped coming with me.
So Matt, say somebody's new to permaculture and they live in a small space, you know, where you may be able to have some backyard chickens, and you probably have a dog running around maybe. Do you have any tips that could be used to incorporate this into their lifestyle?
Totally. Maybe even let's take it smaller. Let's go even more challenging. Let's go urban. So that's the one that everyone's afraid of. They're like, well, I want to be green, I want to do permaculture, but I'm in an apartment building. So there are things that grow with like hardly any light. There are actual citrus trees that grow in apartments. They're low light citrus. So they never need to come outside. So there are things for this. And then if you have a balcony, turn that into a greenhouse or a cold frame. And then you pot everything, and what you do is you basically, after you do a run of something, you dump the soil out, and then you have to like reboot your soil. There's a bunch of different ways you can reboot your soil. I mean, you probably could create a trough and like never till it. I would have to experiment with it, because what you could do is you could grow beans in with it, and then you could cut it and make the soil, and you could chop and drop it. But you would want to do a perennial thing. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like we cut the soil for annuals. We don't till the soil. We want to just make it so we get them in, right? Mm-hmm. Or you toss them and then cover them, annuals too. That works. But like you never cut a perennial. So you would, and you can amend sort of, I guess, but like a kiwi is perfect. So let's say you have a kiwi male, put it in a smaller pot because you just need the flowers for it. You do a kiwi female, and you have the kiwi female you can have grow into the house if you want fuzzy, like around the windows and stuff. But if you're in a colder time, let's say New York City, you could do hardy kiwi and start growing it up. Talk to all your neighbors and be like, here's a basket of them. I'm growing them, and they all eat them and be like, this is wonderful. I want this. And be like, okay, let it grow onto your balcony, because next year it's there. And for real, next year it will be there. It goes 40 to 60 feet into the air, okay? So it will be there. So and then what you do next year is you're like, all right, guys, you love that. So now convince your neighbors. And so suddenly, everyone can take a branch of that and dip it into a pot of soil and cover it, put a rock on top of that, have it root. And then suddenly, everyone has a piece of that kiwi, and it's, even if your neighbor moves in and goes, I hate this, cuts it all. It's still alive because everyone's rooting it on each balcony. And so, right? And then let's say you go away for 2 weeks. Well, the soil dries up on your balcony, but that doesn't mean that kills the plant. The plant's 40 feet tall, wrapped around your Manhattan skyscraper, giving you shade in the August heat. In the mugginess, it provides this cooling effect, right? So, you know, like I would do something like that. You can totally grow things inside and have them go out the window. So, like, let's say you have a pumpkin or something crazier like, oh, you could do something so cool. Like, you could do the small, like, melons. Like, you could do the rich sweetness 132 or the Tigger melon. Tigger melon, you know, the stripes, right? You could grow that and have it crawl out the window. They're so easy to train. You would just do, like, you would just do some, I'm smelling burning. Hold on. Not us. Not us. But the other house.
Okay, gosh.
Not my dinner burning. Yeah, there's a lot of things you can do.
I hope someone in Manhattan's listening to this about the kiwi tree, because that sounds pretty cool. That would be a cool thing to see.
Right, and then indoors, you got all this shade, right? You got all this darkness potentially inside. No windows, maybe even. So I would just. Do you smell that?
Yeah.
It's burning. Yeah, it's not. Well, anyway. So you could do mushrooms very easily, and you have all this paper waste. Oyster mushrooms can, like, lots of mushrooms eat that. You just shred it, you get it wet, and well, Goldilocks wet, right? Can't be too wet, can't be too dry. And then you can inoculate it all, and let's say some of it is questionable paper, and you don't like the you're worried about the toxins and stuff. You know, rip it up and turn it back into soil. It gets trapped into long chains of carbon. I guess that's what compost is. That's why it's so dark. So that's carbon, you know. You can grow trees in crude oil because it's all carbon too. People have done this actually in Iran. They did this in the 90s. So you take that compost and then you can grow your food in it. So most people would just eat the mushrooms though. So, and then you could even take your coffee grind and grow oyster mushrooms on it if you drink coffee, or you're doing Gerson therapy or something like that. So, I mean, there's a billion and one options. Urban permaculture is a huge growing field, especially because it requires a lot of creativity, and because a lot of the solutions require participation with lots of groups of people. So you get like an apartment complex agreeing to do something, and then you get some real change happening. And I just don't think that any mandate would ever work, because you're asking people to eat it. You know what I mean? They're going to want to grow what they want to grow. They're going to want to love what they want to love. You can't mandate anything. And so that's the other thing about permaculture, is it decentralizes everything, which gardening is a great way for people to take control of their food power, and a way to declare their food sovereignty and be like, listen, I have control over what goes into my body. Despite what the FDA says, that we have no choice over what goes into our body. I believe we do. So, yeah, I hope that people start using more urban permaculture, because they've got all the resources. They've got all that waste that they can use as compost. They've got all that paper. It's all concrete, so you're trapping all that water. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like New York City has tons of water. It also all flows out to the sea. And actually, when it rains really hard, all the sewage overflows into the Long Island Sound. And that's why we could swim in it routinely growing up. So we have plenty of resources. We just have to get wise and use them wisely. What if we took all that water and filled up, a few of those parking things all the way up and did fishing? We did aquaponics in the middle of the city.
Yeah, sounds like lots of possibilities. So you're trying to pass a lot of this on to your students, right? Because you're a teacher, and you're also writing a book on permaculture, because you didn't find any resources out there
For
that
kids.
fit
And
what
the
you
thing
need,
is,
right?
there's stuff to help kids in gardens written for adults. I don't want something a sixth grader can take and go, this is cool. Do you need any help? No, no, no. I'm fine. I'm going to go do something. And then they go away, and they find value in it, and they can do it. For me, growing up, like I read everything and learned almost everything myself first, because we'd go to bed when it was light out, and we had to be quiet. We were spanked. So there was a big library in the room with like all the way to like college level reading, and so I just read for like ever. I would stay up like really, really late reading, and so I digested a lot, and like I feel like that's given me a lot of my ability to do what I do, is because I feel like I can figure things out. And our school manuals are designed to be taught by experts to children. We take information, we educate them. And it's like, no, actually, you can't force anyone to learn anything. You can create resentment and hatred and anger, but you can't force someone to love something. You can't force someone to be passionate about something. So, anyway.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. So how's the book? Is it on its way? Is it done?
Oh, yeah.
How's it going?
Right, it's done. We just are waiting for the art. We basically, I had like 4 awesome sketches we were going to add in and have like this awesome guy who's this world famous illustrator, Wayne Fleming, who did the cover for Bill Mollison's Introduction to Permaculture. And we made so much money so fast that I had to come up with something that I felt would make it worthwhile to keep going for the stretch goals, on Kickstarter. And the thing is, it's like, okay, well, I can't like go and advertise unless I have a stretch goal that's meaningful. It can't just be like profit for me, because I wouldn't be able to say anything else. Like, support me getting out of debt. You know what I mean? Like, so I was like, all right, well, if we're going to hit 15,000, we're going to make this book better. And so I made a crazy promise and said at 15,000, we would put the workbooks in color. If you know anything about printing, the difference between black and white and color, quite pricey, like ridiculously pricey, okay? And some of these books are going all the way to Australia, where the book may have cost me, they may be pledging $45, but shipping alone is $55.
Wow.
So
you
the
did
equation at $15,000 was me breaking even, right? So because I want to be fair, right? So I broke even at 15, and like my wife totally was like, there's no margin for error, right? So I'm like, okay, well, the month's half over, and so I started promoting because I could believe in it, right? And so I raised a lot more money, and we hit 27,000. And I actually added more goals in, and we added more art in, because again, I have a compulsion to speak the truth, because I believe that's the only way to live and the only way to be honest to oneself and to have full power over what we have to offer ourselves. I can only access what I have if I'm truly honest. So I can't advertise something that would just be purely selfish. It would come through. You know what I mean? Even I could. You know what I mean? I can't lie. So I just had to improve it, and the coolest thing about it is it's going to be amazing. It's going to be like way better than anything I could possibly imagine, and it's going to be like more scientific. We've added like all this like technical stuff in, because he's such a good artist, and his comic style, his like humor. You can see some of the art on my Facebook, facebook.com, the Permaculture Student. Some of the artwork is just got like this wonderful humor, and you can just like tell kids are gonna read it and be like engaged instantly by the style. And it's like, wow, this is where it's at. And actually, the next 2 volumes, no, you can't eat it. My dog's literally eating, he's eating sprouted potatoes and onions. I don't know why, but he's maybe just...
That's good stuff.
So when is it due out?
That's also sprouting, and so I'm going to break it up and replant it and everything. I do a lot of that, and so, like, for instance, like, this is a very permy thing to do. You cut the bottom of this off and put it in a shallow dish with a little bit of water, and all these will open up and roots will come out, and then the top will regrow this. And then you can plant that, and then you have onions again. And so you could forever have onions and never buy seed. Or let it go to seed and then plant those. So, you know what I mean? Tons of options. It's getting cold. How much time, more time do we have?
Well, we probably better wrap it up now.
Yeah.
So we're going to hit an hour here, getting close pretty quick. But it's been great talking with you. Where can people find you, Matt, if they wanted to follow what you're doing on your property and how your books come along?
Well, on Twitter, I'm Permaculture123. On Facebook, the best place is the Permaculture Student. So just facebook.com/the Permaculture Student. Or you can go to my website, thepermaculturestudent.com. There's lesson plans up there, but there are also, you know, recipes. So, like, you want to learn how to sheet mulch. There's my lesson plan is like $5, and you get how to sheet mulch, how to make a worm juice compost bin, and then the third one's how to make a swale on contour. So those 3 lessons are in there at just $5. It's got illustrations, it's got step-by-step directions, and it's an instant PDF download that you can have forever and do what you will. So there's that. That's where it can be found. I'll be back on Kickstarter in probably 4 to 5 months doing the next volume, because the first volume is it can be used by anyone. It can be used by adults or families or homeschoolers or public school or Montessori or, you know, anything. But it's primarily for middle schoolers because it's set in an academic reference language that's open to any level reader, really. That can comprehend this. So, and then I've got to do the high school versions, which are more advanced. I'm 60 pages into the rough draft for the next volume, the 9th, 10th grade volume. And that's going to have more things in it. That's going to have, like, gasification. That's going to have things like mycoremediation, how to use mushrooms to clean water or fix the soil contaminants. Or, like, you know, an experiment like taking cigarette butts and training mushrooms to eat them. Stuff like that, you know. Actually, I want the first thing to do is we make a mushroom sculpture to inoculate a piece of wood and then mushrooms on it, and it's like a living sculpture they can bring home. So stuff like that, you know, fun stuff that we can get into schools and have as independent programs. I'm actually teaching the first permaculture class with a curriculum that's designed for high school this fall at Minarets High School, which is the high school I teach at in the foothills over here. Whew, it's getting cold.
All right, we better let you go. Well, thank you and best of luck with your book. And thank you so much for giving us the time this evening. It's great to talk to you. All right.
Great to talk to you. And if you guys have any questions ever, just tweet at me at Permaculture123 and I'll answer on there. Always. I'm a teacher, so I will always give information.
All right. Thanks. Take care.
All right, have a good one.